Two hotheads where activism happens. Is that it?
Here, I'm former writer for the Boston Phoenix, freelancing now.
I'm Brad Marston. I'm watching Two Hotheads, where activism happens.
A lot of topics covered. I think there was a good variety of opinions expressed, and I'd do it again.
Diverse opinions, right to the left. Really enjoyed discussing the topics. Well, for me, really, I mean, I'm a political consultant, so the main focus for me is the upcoming special election, and really specifically for U.S. Senate. I think we need some balance for Massachusetts. Both in the State House and down in Washington.
Got a couple of new shops where I'm trying to bargain some first contracts at some allegedly progressive institutions that seem to forget that workers have a right to unionize, and it's a little rough. Two hotheads where activism happens.
Back live, Two Hotheads where activism happens on unregularradio.com. The phone number is 617-606-3700. You can also send us instant feedback. It's if@unregularradio.com. Is that still the instant feedback, Matt?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So you can send that over to we got a panel here. I'm calling it the Mass Poli panel.
Mass Poli?
Yeah, which is on Twitter.
Twitter hashtag Mass Poli?
Yeah.
And M.A. Poli.
Yeah.
Yeah, M.A. Poli, that's right.
M.A. Poli.
Yep.
Yeah, and M.A. Sen.
Yep.
S-E-N.
That's right.
And we're going to do that because now we got to talk about the Mass Senate campaign. And speaking of the ad that was just played, that is the first radio ad that we know of for a medical marijuana evaluation, getting a doctor, get a recommendation in Massachusetts. Medical marijuana is now law. They're still working on all the regulations, of course, but it's become an issue with Elizabeth Warren saying that about Dan Winslow, and it looks like Dan Winslow does support legalization. What do we think about this Mass Senate campaign right now? Specifically, the candidates. I want to hear everyone's opinion of the 5 candidates. I could start. Gabriel Gomez. I don't know. I mean, he seems like a very ambitious guy that will say what he needs to do to get elected. I look at Michael Sullivan. I mean, come on. He worked for Ashcroft Consulting, his last position after being a U.S. attorney. I don't see how he can support any of the issues I care about. Dan Winslow, I'm impressed. He's trying to earn my vote, and he might get it. Ed Markey, I like him on the unions. That's about it. I mean, I just, and Stephen Lynch, I like him as a person. I've talked to him and had conversations with him, but a lot of the issues I just don't support. Like, Ed Markey and Stephen Lynch were for the war, and now they're against the war. You know what I mean? It just seems like, again, like there's no real conviction there. I don't see them down at the picket line, but they're union. They want the union vote even. That's the thing that impresses me about them the most. But still, it doesn't seem like they're real, like this Winslow guy is. Like, I might not agree with Dan Winslow on everything, but he seems real. That's what I really like about him right now. Is he responds to his own Twitter. He's coming out more to the community from what I see. So that's my rundown of the 4 candidates. I think Winslow is running the campaign that he should be running right now. And I think Ed Markey is still obviously the favorite, the person that I would expect to be elected the next U.S. Senator.
All right, this is Frank. Ed Markey, he's my congressman. His office is right down the street from my house, and every time I try to talk to him, he just doesn't seem to be there. And I mean, I like his stance on net neutrality. He's good on privacy.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, that's another issue. You're right. Yep.
I think he was the only one who came out and voted against indemnifying the telecom companies for. Basically saying, okay, well, you've been spying for us for X amount of time, but now it's legal, so don't worry about it, guys. You won't get, sued or put in any kind of trouble or anything like that. Lynch is all right. I mean, it's like kind of just like I'd rather someone from the outside, and the only kind of upside to me for getting Markey to win would be that I would get a new congressperson, and that would kind of shake things up in my district a little bit. Supposedly Scorantino was going to be running for his seat, and I'm not sure. I think Frank Andanova, he's got so many A's in his name. Adavanola, thank you. Who gave me a push card while I was taking a piss. And I mean, if you're going to give people push cards when they're taking a piss, you might get my vote. I'm just saying that. And then Sullivan, neocon hack, Gomez, don't really care for much for him. Winslow, I'm liking, for the same reasons that you just said.
I don't really even look at Republicans, quite frankly. What I think about Dan is he's scary because he is so centrist, kind of, and he comes across as not being crazy like some of the others do. And all I'll say in reference to him is Scott Brown. Scott Brown was one thing when he said he was gonna represent people. He sold himself as a moderate. He went to Washington and voted with the Republicans. And I think Winslow wouldn't be any different. As far as the two Democrats, I'm sure some people are aware of some controversy over whether Lynch should have gotten the union endorsement, blah, blah, blah. Markey, to me, is a more left-to-center guy. Lynch is, somewhat conservative. I am a 56-year-old openly gay man who has some issues around people who have problems with that. Call me crazy, but
crazy.
You don't like me, I ain't too fond of you.
Yeah.
So
that's Lynch's problem, the marijuana thing too. Like I think we have much more chance with Ed Markey and marijuana. Lynch is a guy who used to smoke weed, apparently, that hates weed now. You know what I mean? Like he had a reasonable discussion with myself on WBZ about marijuana, but it just seems like he gets caught up on those issues that it doesn't make any sense. Like you're running in Massachusetts, how can you be in the Democratic Party?
I also remember when he first won the seat and when he ran against Cheryl Jakes, and I'll just leave it at that.
There you go. She was good too, right?
She was a lesbian, and I think that became part of the campaign when it shouldn't have at times.
I think obviously Markey's the odds-on favorite to win the Democratic primary. If you look at Lynch's record, 90, votes with Pelosi 98% of the time. Ed Markey would love to see him as the nominee because then the Republican just say, vote for so-and-so, so-and-so because we already have a radical left-wing moonbat senator. We don't need two. Gabe Gomez. That would be Elizabeth Warren. Mike Sullivan, he is, he's pro-life, former Bush administration official. He'd be a tough sell in a general election, though I think he's probably right now odds-on favorite.
He's the favorite. That's what's weird.
Well, but nobody's done a realistic poll. Gabe Gomez probably took a step too far running for Senate. Nice guy, Hispanic, has the backing of the Mass GOP. Dan Winslow.
What does that really mean, though? The backing of the Mass GOP.
The 11 people that belong to the party are behind
They
them.
got some money, though, those 11 people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I mean, obviously nothing compared to the Democratic operation. But I mean, I'm treasurer of the Boston Republican City Committee. When 2 years ago when we started, we had 6 organized out of the 22 wards. We now have 16. Okay, are we going to win Boston anytime soon? No, but if we can get 10, 20,000 more votes out of Boston, that means we're not starting as far behind in general elections. Thing I will say about Dan Winslow, he's the only guy I know who can walk into Gillette Stadium on an autumn Sunday and still be confident he's probably the smartest guy in the room.
Wow. I think he's pretty smart to some of the things he's been saying on Twitter and doing.
Unfortunately, I just have to say that I think these are slim pickings anyways. They're all old men. And
Hey, watch it.
Hey, my uterus is like the elephant in the room right now.
I wasn't going to say that.
The biggest issue for me is what candidate is actually going to listen to voters. At the end of the day, if you put Markey in there, he's got pull in Congress. People know his name. He's radical. It would put Massachusetts in a better decision-making position on a national level. But
who are you going to vote for right now? If you had to put, like, in the primary, are you going to pull it for Markey, or are you going to pull it for, like, a Dan Winslow?
Well, what's interesting with Winslow is, I mean, his campaigning, the way he's campaigning, like you said, there's the realness element. But I have to, just climate is such a big issue. I would have to lean for Markey, but that's me.
All right.
But Markey's stance on climate, though, is his big solution is cap and trade.
Yeah, which I
and
don't
that
like.
sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's going to pass on the cost to you and to me.
Yeah.
And it's
And
not
let the
going to
big
really
corporations continue to pollute with a license.
exactly.
I mean,
While they can say, oh well, I bought
they pass it on
50
to us.
hectares, for $25, and then I'm in South America somewhere. But at the same time, I'm going to raise your electric bill, $15 a month. And that's something that's going to be a real toll to people.
Yep.
Well, until a candidate comes up that wants to push, alternative energy, like entirely, and build the infrastructure to create those jobs and to give those options to people. I mean, to fight it, you need pull in Washington, and
I dig that. I dig that, but I don't think that his answer is necessarily the right one. His cap and trade is not, because it's not really working out very well for Europe. I mean, energy prices are going up in Europe, and they have cap and trade there. So I mean, what is that really an actual solution? I think, and that's what I would post to Ed Markey. And when I worked for John Cunningham, who ran against Ed Markey back in 2008, we posed that question to Markey, and he didn't really have much to say about it. We plopped the paper on the table, and he was like, Bob, and I started talking about the Celtics. I mean, I don't know, that's my problem with Markey.
Were they winning then?
I don't think so.
Just a Boston reference.
Yeah, no, he loves basketball.
I mean, I think it's reflected in this table. There are people, very liberal, very conservative, at least on small government fiscal issues. I think Dan Winslow's the kind of guy that a lot of the people in Massachusetts are looking for, and who the media keeps saying, where is the, Ed Brooke Republican? Yes, Dan is this small government, good government, private sector growth Republican, but he's also, pro-equal marriage. He's pro-choice. He's liberal on a lot of social issues. And again, I think that's the kind of Republican that a lot of moderate Massachusetts voters can get behind.
Wow.
Take it.
Can I just mention one thing about the idea that somebody's pro this or pro that or whatever?
Yes.
I also have a real issue around, and again, I'm a lifelong Democrat, but 80% of the Democrats in this state are not Democrats in my book, okay? So it's a game. It's a game. And anybody who thinks it's not a game that's rigged needs to go to Mohegan Sun or someplace and put your money on the goddamn table and gamble it, because that's what you're doing anyways. Because with all due respect, when that insurance vote that I talked about, there were 41 people who were with us. And I think 5 of them were Republicans, and it was not because they were with us, it was because the bill was not harsh enough on anti-union enough. So the people that voted against us included some people that have reputations in the state of Massachusetts as being staunch liberals, especially out my way. I mean, I'm in Holyoke, but I go up to Northampton, Amherst, that area which we call the tofu curtain, okay? I look conservative sometimes up there. And those folks, basically, some of them actually came right out and said, I couldn't vote against the speaker. So this is a rigged game. People who say they're with you sometimes are with you because it's safe to be with you, because they know it's never going to come out of committee. It's never going to get a vote. When it does get the vote, it's already been determined what the vote will be. So anybody who thinks that we live in a true democracy can go get help
Isn't
somewhere.
that the truth at the State House, the Mass State House? I mean, there was a bill that Bob Hedlund is trying to bring up. State Senator, Republican Bob Hedlund. And it's about open meeting laws. How you, at the local level, town committee, they have to have open meeting law. They have to follow the state law. But within those committees that you're talking about at the State House, they don't follow the open committee law. Shouldn't there be an open committee law?
They don't follow their own rules. There was a retirement piece that came out for pension reform that John Sybeck, who's out our way, who's a liberal supposedly, and I like John, but he was the chairman of the committee that came out of, and I don't remember which one. And the folks there were under orders not to release who voted which way, which is against their own rules.
Every year we went up for the State House for the medical and the decrim and the legal. We got voted down. They would look at our testimony. First they would laugh at us, and then they showed sympathy, and then they asked questions. But every time there would be a vote, they would vote against letting it out of committee. They wouldn't let it come to a vote on the floor, and they would never tell us who people even voted for. We'd find out little bits and pieces through the press, but
you got to call. You got to call every one of them, see how they're voting, what they're doing, and it's a serious effort, and it comes back to media too. In that, it
sucks that we too often we have to rely on volunteers like ourselves to do it as private citizens.
Well, they do voice votes instead of actual real votes,
and they don't do it in front of the public. A lot of other states will do those votes in front of the public, so at least we can see it, like on video. Massachusetts is very close. Does everyone support that law that Headland wants to pass, which is the open meeting law for the state house, the committees?
I ran for state rep back in 2010 in probably the most impossible district for a Republican. People are undeclared in my district, which is Back Bay, Beacon Hill, West End, and 5 precincts in Cambridge, and they're undeclared because the Democrats are just too damn conservative for them. But that was a big issue. Was open meeting law, transparency. I kept saying in stump speech after stump speech that Speaker of the House, President of the Senate comes out and says, here's the bill and here is how you're going to vote for it. And that's what they do. We never see the debate behind it. We never see the thinking behind their votes unless, as Ron points out, it's a vote that they take to make themselves look better.
Do we all like the idea that they might pass a law? Would you support that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, my favorite is I had a buddy who was very politically involved. He was actually the political director for a certain progressive group. I will remain nameless at the moment. But when he said to me, I can't believe the speaker wouldn't release Representative so-and-so to vote the way she wanted to, I was like, what do you mean?
I know.
And I'm no virgin, trust me. But I was like, what do you mean, vote release? And it was basically, you need permission to vote differently than the speaker wants you to.
That's exactly
Which is not democracy where I come from.
And this is the true reality of going up to the State House, no matter what the issue is. And it's so funny the way that they talk to you, like, oh, well, we finally decided the leadership to back you. It's like, that's how it works. It's like you're either yes or no. Doesn't matter what happens at the hearing. Frank?
My experience, with Headland, actually, specifically, is when the S-2028 happened in 2009, and they tried to pass basically the Model State Powers Act, which is a piece of FEMA legislation that Richard Moore, who used to be the deputy director of FEMA under Bill Clinton, introduced into the Senate. And Headland had just come back from Florida, and he voted for the bill. And I looked at everyone who voted for the bill because they happened to take an actual counted vote. And so I know Headland, so I messaged him, and I was like, Bob, what the fuck? Why did you vote for this? And he was like, oh, well, Scott Brown told me to vote for it. He's like, I just got back from Florida. And and that's like, but he ended up, like, we pushed him on it. He actually ended up going on Fox News and being like, yeah, I didn't read it. They told me to vote for it. I voted for it. I read it afterwards, and I was like, oh, man, what did I just vote for?
I like Headland.
Yeah, I like Headland, too. I mean, Headland's a cool dude,
He's going to come on this show. We'll try to get him on.
He'll definitely come on.
We'll get him on. If you know him that well, get him on.
All right, I'll get him on.
I'm sending the guy messages. I want him on. We should get to some other issues where
we should. Yeah. Let's talk a little Homeland Security. So the Department of Homeland Security has recently, in the last year, purchased 3 bullets for every man, woman, and child in this country. They have also recently, just in the past month, purchased 2,700 light armored tanks for domestic use.
This is like one of those stories, too, like the rounds of ammunition, and you see it on like all the conspiracy sites.
Yeah.
And it was one of those stories where it's so hard to believe because where the sources, but you look it up, it's like, this is facts.
Yeah, and then on top of that, they have purchased. Thank you.
New word for 400.
Excellent. So they've purchased these paper targets that are pictures of pregnant women holding guns, little kids holding guns, like a woman with like a shopping bag, and like so basically just your like run of the mill American citizens. And the Department of Homeland Security is running training drills with their agents shooting at American citizens, essentially.
Where do you read that story? Where's that coming from?
I'll get you the link right now.
Why do I want to guess?
But this is so they can differentiate between a pregnant woman with a gun and one without.
That probably is why. That's probably why. Hold on, let me find that.
So it's just the bad.
So how do you feel about that? How do you feel? Does that make you? Does that make you feel cozy and nice and tucked in when you go to bed?
I wish they spent that money on the tea. You know what I mean?
No kidding, right?
Like, it makes me, wonder if they're not really preparing for the end, the financial cliff that is all like. We're looking at. That's another. Does anyone want to speak on that first? What Frank just said? No one.
I think they had to spend the money just to keep the military supply businesses in business. This sounds
because there's been a lull.
Well, we did
it out somewhere.
Yeah, we did. We did pull 100,000 troops out of Iraq. Okay. We're drawing down in Afghanistan.
So maybe
I was actually watching. Actually, I think it was a special report, and Charles Krauthammer kind of came out, one of my favorite commentators, and he said, I've looked into this, and he really cast into doubt whether or not the Department of Homeland Security had bought 1.2 billion rounds of ammunition in the last year. I'd love to see the source.
Well, Frank's got a source here. Where's the source, Frank?
That's the paper targets. If you go back, there's several sources that talk about the purchase of the weapons, of the ammunition, and so they're paper targets of pregnant women, little kids with guns. Oh. The company that makes them has recently come out. According to the headline I just read, recently come out and actually lamented for doing so.
That's crazy.
But actually, another important thing is DHS just put out a bid for a housing, like a warehouse that's going to house all of a lot of their ammunition and things like that. And guess where it's going to be?
Boston?
Right here in Boston.
No way.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, this was the home of the revolution or whatever, right?
Right. So why shouldn't it be where the death of the revolution happens as well?
I mean, sir. It makes you wonder, because we were talking, Frank, privately about the banks.
Yep.
And this what's this country?
Cyprus.
Cyprus.
Oh yeah, I wanted to bring that up. Thank you for reminding me about Cyprus.
Right?
Bank holiday right now.
They're doing a bank holiday, and they're taking basically 10% of people's savings out of their account to pay off the banksters. The EU is demanding this from them, and if you look at Ireland, there was a speech that I wanted to play, but it was a journalist asking one of the bankers, the EU bankers, about the situation of Ireland, and it's basically the situation of all of the Western world, America too. Iceland faced it probably the worst. They decided a couple of years ago to not pay off the bankers, to default on the debt, to jail the bankers, to forgive the home loans for the people who are living in their homes. And the Western world said, "Oh, you guys are done. Your country is ruined." And you know what? Iceland's doing great now. They've created their own banking system that is more stable, that doesn't have all this Ponzi. It was basically a reset. Should we do this in the rest of the countries in the West, or should we follow this example that's happening in Cyprus of
austerity and let's
take people's savings. Let's take people's savings to pay the bankers, because that's where it's headed, it seems.
Well,
what do we do?
I don't know, but before that, back to the issue of shooting pregnant women and stuff. I mean, when you have folks that are talking about drones being able to become, in this country, and there's a question about whether it would be okay to basically, kill a private citizen in the United States of America with a drone, do you really think that somebody's going to have a problem shooting somebody?
Well, that's the thing, when you have this big push, going on right now, which is gun control. Why don't we ever talk about gun control? You have all this stuff, this assault weapons ban, this limiting of the size of clips, and as if that's going to stop gun crime. Like criminals are going to commit crimes, and basically what the gist of it is that like eventually the American citizen is going to be unarmed. You're going to have like a musket. And it's going to be 1776 again. You're going to have to fight against a drone with a musket.
The banks will be closed.
I don't think you can hit a drone with a musket. I think you need a Barrett 50 cal. And, I think I should be able to buy that at the store. That's just my opinion, man.
Coming from New Hampshire and having, been a gun owner, licensed and otherwise over the years, I'd have to say that if you can't hit your target with anything less than an assault rifle, your ass should not be in the woods hunting down. Okay? So, I mean, you really got to give this some consideration. And also the idea that, the revolution back then was quite different than a revolution now would be. And I think that you are pissing up a rope if you think that all of the clips and firepower you could muster is going to do much against what you'd be doing.
An organization with drones and
tanks and
Scud missiles and infrared technology and HARP. I mean, yeah, sure. No, absolutely. I agree with that sentiment. But essentially, like, the spirit of this country, the reason why it's the only thing that says necessary in the Constitution is the right to bear arms. It says necessary.
It says a militia.
There's a comma. There's a comma. People forget about the comma. It says necessary for the defense of a free state. Comma, the right of the people's.
That's great.
You know what I mean?
And just on a different note, as somebody who worked lock psych for over a decade, when I would have people who
That's
were...
not the First Amendment.
No. Well,
it's necessary for the defense of a free state.
I heard you say for the people to...
Yeah, the right of the people. Well, that's why I said I wasn't going to say it, because I was going to screw it up. All right.
I think most people listening probably know the Second Amendment.
Excellent.
But I got to tell you, I worked lock psych for over a decade. Nothing was more frightening to me than when I would be doing a search and I'd come across somebody who had a 20-year history of mental illness, including psychiatric hospitalizations, who would have a firearms card for all legal purposes.
And that's scary.
Damn scary.
That's scary. Yeah, no.
What was scarier was when I would find bullets and no gun, which happened on one occasion.
I think on the Department of Homeland Security, in reaction to 9/11, we took 15 dysfunctional agencies, put them together into one dysfunctional agency, and then doubled its size again. Yeah. So there's obviously reason to worry about that. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
What about the banks? What about the banks? The banking situation.
The banks made a huge mistake when we eliminated Glass-Steagall. There should be investment banks, and there should be banking banks.
What do we do now, though? Do you think default? Like, if you had to make the choice between taking people's savings away from their savings account or to default on the loans, what would you do?
I honestly, I think it's a false dichotomy. If I have those two choices, I'd do nothing.
Oh, wow.
What were you going to say, Ariel? I think I really had something to say.
Oh, I was on gun violence. I mean, I don't know if you guys listened to the NPR piece called Harper High that really looked at it. Was 2 parts. They sent reporters to a high school in Chicago. I think it was 29 gun-related murders they'd had that year, or shootings. But you look at the gang violence and the crime that is tied to it. I think it's a real cultural shame. So more than just the Second Amendment. I mean, you had to amend slavery, right?
You got to get down to base causes. You brought up gang violence. Okay, it's better education. It's not putting 50 or 60% of African American young men in prison, 18 to 22, on drugs, on victimless crimes, because these kids,
nonviolent crimes,
these kids can overcome an addiction. They can't overcome a conviction.
Exactly.
You send them to prison.
Give a kid a felony.
You're basically giving him a scholarship to crime you.
Yep. And kind of like being sick, you make money for doctors. If you're you're making money for someone when you are in prison.
The prison industrial complex, which is a huge business.
It's a huge business, and something that really is interesting to touch, briefly on the immigration issue that I wanted to bring up. In Arizona right now, there are farms that have prisoners who, the week before they got arrested, were picking crops on that farm illegally, getting paid $3 an hour to do it, and then they get arrested, they get put in jail, and they're working the same field, getting paid like 60 cents to do it.
But they're in a nicer prison cell than they were a farm place, right? I mean,
I'm just saying, there's a huge private prison industrial complex in this country.
On Wall Street, we used to call that arbitrage.
Arbitrage? That's not arbitrage.
Yeah, and even
I don't know what that means, but it just sounds like just terrible.
It's true though. I mean, it's that's America.
America.
The justice system is full profit. Even when the prisons aren't privatized, like in Massachusetts.
Yep.
They're not privatized prisons here. Not the state ones.
Yeah. Well,
it's still full profit.
Yeah.
The state's still making a lot of money off of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of immigration. Do we have something that we want to read on?
Well, I
from James, actually?
We had something that the immigration thing there was James? I didn't have anything from anyone named James about immigration. What are you talking about?
I thought you did.
No. I had a question about immigration, you know?
Right.
So, like, we're going to be facing in Obama's term, supposedly, we're going to be facing some immigration reform, right? And so, you know, Obama supported things like the DREAM Act, you know, which I think is a perfectly good idea. But I think that my question, or the essence of my question, is, do you, like, whether or not you think that, like, people who came here illegally should be afforded rights or what have you, but, like, do you believe that if it was you, you know, if it was you that had to face, you know, either breaking a law or providing for your family, you know, what would you choose? Would you jump that fence? Would you dig under that fence? Would you swim over that river? Would you hide in that shipping container? I mean, what would you do if that just breaking a law was stood between you and providing for your family? Ron.
I get into this with some labor folks because, frankly, some people have this, you know, conservative idea that, you know, my people came here like the proper way and this and that. And I just have to say, as somebody of French-Canadian heritage, you know, our asses came down all the time to do stuff. We were like the Mexicans from the north. And, you know, my grandfather was a blacksmith. You know, there were people that came down to pick crops and what have you, work on the farms. And I can't find records of those folks. I mean, this idea that there's some legal way to come into this country is a more recent is that the right word? Construction of the way things work. I mean, what does WAP stand for? Without papers.
Yeah.
Okay, so this idea that suddenly people are breaking the law, and I loathe the term illegal because I do believe there is no such thing as an illegal human being. It's
no human is illegal, and that's true. No human is illegal.
So I mean, find a way to give people a living wage, and you know, let's not fuck up other countries' economies to make them want to come here, which is half of the problem sometimes. NAFTA created more problems and made it and lowered wages in Mexico and stuff than anywhere else. I mean, it was a piece of shit legislation that some of our Democrats
that Ed Markey voted for.
Well, and Clinton friggin' was the guy, wasn't he?
Well, Clinton's the one who got rid of Glass-Steagall, but Brad.
Well, he also did the.
I mean, I guess I'd take issue with the idea that Ron says, you know, basically opting for a borderless world. We are a country. We do have borders. We have rules. Our immigration rules are a lot less strict than any of the countries to our south. But I think it's wrong to focus on just our southern border. Our borders include our airports and our ports, where 40% of people who are here illegally have just overstayed their visas. We need a smart, comprehensive immigration reform. If you try to come here legally, it shouldn't take you 10 years and $50,000 to do it. We need a guest worker program so workers can come in
and not be exploited.
And exactly. Okay, be out of the shadows. And I think
not be exploited on those workers things, because those are exploitive in themselves.
Okay, well, somebody's going to get somewhere in the world, someone is going to be exploited, so there is always going to be a reason for liberals to exist, okay? You can worry about that one person someplace, okay? Now, if I could just finish. I think you bring these people out of the shadows, which would go a long way to them not being exploited. Give them permanent residency. If they came here illegally, they never get citizenship. They never get the vote.
They weren't in the shadows when they were cutting Mitt Romney's lawn.
Let me ask you a question, though. He asked you a direct question. The question is, what would you do? Would you?
I'd break the law in a heartbeat.
So you'd break the law?
Oh, sure.
Absolutely.
And be willing to pay the consequences.
I like that you are, like, you know, kind of on the you are reasonable. Like, I expected you to be less reasonable on this. Yeah, you are reasonable. But I still feel
we were really kind of counting on you not being very reasonable.
Like, I feel like the Republicans so often don't have any sympathy for the human condition. These are human beings, and that the problems they have is what Ron said. Like, it's NAFTA and the drug war, and that's our doing. That's why they're coming here. It's because of us. The reason, like, all these people that call them illegals and all this other crap that want to be against it.
They're taking our jobs.
Get our country out of their country.
Jobs that no one else will do.
Yeah, and it's like, I just want, like, one of the things I saw that you posted on your Facebook. in one of the statements that you said was,
"Oh God,
you didn't." I know. And if it's okay to be like, say, you know what, I maybe shouldn't have posted that. Whatever, we all have done that. But I just want to like the point that you made. One of the points,
including
out of a greater point, you were actually making a greater point. But the thing that I had contend with that I want to ask you about is that you said that. You thought that there were millions of illegals illegally voting right now in America. Do you really believe that? Because I don't. I mean, if you really think about it, I think that's red meat for the Republicans not to use their brain.
Actually, after listening to your conversation in the first segment, I really do have to kind of rethink that statement.
All right.
You know, but you've also
what
got
person in their right mind would walk into a place with lots of cops?
Yeah, that's why. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think that sometimes we get so caught up in dogma, we don't really.
But you got to remember, I'm also the guy that posted on his Facebook. In a pictograph saying, "I'm sorry, I haven't responded to your friend request, but apparently Facebook has." Deactivated the fuck off bitch button.
So you're pretty free on your Facebook. Ariel, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I would do whatever I had to do. I would break a law to support myself. You know, I'm not thinking in terms of a family, but it's expensive. It's a lot of money to apply for citizenship on top of other things. It's a test. People who English isn't their native language, they got to learn. There's a huge process that already exists to become a legal resident. So.
That's it, folks. That's the two hotheads this week where activism happens. Do we have anything else? We should give Evan.
Yeah, so Evan Kenny's going to be having a campaign event, kickoff event for school committee. It's going to be at 1099 Main Street in Wakefield at the dockside. Starts at 7, goes till, I think, 10.
Tomorrow night?
Sunday night, asking for a donation of $50. But, you know, if you don't have any money, just come on down. It's going to be a good time. There's going to be a lot of Republican muckety-mucks there that you can corner and ask the tough questions.
We'll be there.
Dan Winslow will be there as well. And Leah Cole's going to be there.
Who's doing awesome.
She is.
Her campaign is going crazy in Peabody. She is. She might win.
Note on Peabody, their mall has a chapel in it. I'm just saying.
That's true. I used to work at the Peabody Mall, but no, they do, and there's all kinds of people there with chapels.
And they sell absolution.
Wrap it up, B.
See you next week.
Two hotheads.